The Peace Egg Part 2. Section 6. Robin thought that Christmas would never come. To the captain and his wife it seemed to come too fast. They had hoped it might bring reconciliation with the old man, but it seemed they had hoped in vain. There were times now when the captain almost regretted the old bachelor's bequest. The familiar scenes of her old home sharpened his wife's grief. To see her father every Sunday in church, with marks of age and infirmity upon him, but with not a look of tenderness for his only child, this tried her sorely. She felt it less abroad, thought the captain. A home in which she frets herself to death, is after all, no great boon. Christmas Eve came. "I'm sure it's quite Christmas enough now," said Robin. "We'll have the peace egg tonight." So as the captain and his wife sat sadly over their fire, the door opened, and Pax ran in shaking his bells, and followed by the nursery mummers. The performance was most successful. It was by no means pathetic, and yet, as has been said, the captain's wife shed tears. "What is the matter, Mama?" said Robert, abruptly dropping his sword and running up to her. "Don't tease Mama with questions," said the captain, "she is not very well, and rather sad. We must all be very kind and good to poor dear Mama," and the captain raised his wife's hand to his lips as he spoke. Robin seized the other hand and kissed it tenderly. He was very fond of his mother. At this moment Pax took a little run, and jumped into Mama's lap, where, sitting facing the company, he opened his black mouth and yawned, with a ludicrous inappropriateness worthy of any clown. It made everybody laugh. "And now we'll go and act in the kitchen," said Nicholas. "Supper at 9 o'clock, remember," shouted the captain. "And we are going to have real frumenty and Yule cakes, such as Mama used to tell us of when we were abroad." "Hooray!" shouted the mummers, and they ran off, Pax leaping from his seat just in time to hustle the Black Prince in the doorway. When the dining-room door was shut, Robert raised his hand, and said, "Hush." The mummers pricked their ears, but there was only a distant harsh and scraping sound, as of stones rubbed together. "They're cleaning the passages," Robert went on, "and Sarah told me they meant to finish the mistletoe, and have everything cleaned up by supper time. They don't want us, I know. Look here, we'll go real mumming instead. That will be fun." Nicholas grinned with delight. "But will Mama let us?" he inquired. "Oh, it will be all right if we're back by supper time," said Robert, hastily. "Only of course we must take care not to catch cold. Come and help me to get some wraps." The old oak chest in which spare shawls, rugs, and coats were kept was soon ransacked, and the mummers' gay dresses hidden by motley wrappers. But no sooner did Darky and Pax behold the coats, etc., than they at once began to leap and bark, as it was their custom to do when they saw any one dressing to go out. Robin was sorely afraid that this would betray them, but though the captain and his wife heard the barking they did not guess the cause. So the front door being very gently opened and closed, the nursery mummers stole away. Section 7. It was a very fine night. The snow was well trodden on the drive, so that it did not wet their feet, but on the trees and shrubs it hung soft and white. "It's much jollier being out at night than in the daytime," said Robin. "Much," responded Nicholas, with intense feeling. "We'll go a wassailing next week," said Robin. "I know all about it, and perhaps we shall get a good lot of money, and then we'll buy tin swords with scabbards for next year. I don't like these sticks. Oh, dear, I wish it wasn't so long between one Christmas and another." "Where shall we go first?" asked Nicholas, as they turned into the high road. "This is the first house," he said. "We'll act here, and all pressed in as quickly as possible." Once safe within the grounds, they shouldered their sticks, and marched with composure. "You're going to the front door," said Nicholas. "Mummers ought to go to the back, we don't know where it is," said Robin, and he rang the front door bell. There was a pause. Then lights shone, steps were heard, and at last a sound of much unbarring, unbolting, and unlocking. It might have been a prison. Then the door was opened by an elderly, timid-looking woman, who held a tallow candle above her head. "Who's there?" she said, "at this time of night?" "We're Christmas mummers," said Robin, stoutly. "We didn't know the way to the back door, and don't you know better than to come here?" said the woman. "Be off with you, as fast as you can, you're only the servant," said Robin. "Go and ask your master and mistress if they wouldn't like to see us act." "We do it very well, you impudent boy, be off with you," repeated the woman. "Master'd no more let you nor any other such rubbish set foot in this house, woman," shouted a voice close behind her, which made her start as if she had been shot. "Who authorizes you to say what your master will or will not do, before you've asked him? The boy is right. You are the servant, and it is not your business to choose for me whom I shall or shall not see. I meant no harm, sir, I'm sure," said the housekeeper, "but I thought you'd never." "My good woman," said her master, "if I had wanted somebody to think for me, you're the last person I should have employed. I hire you to obey orders, not to think. I'm sure, sir," said the housekeeper, whose only form of argument was reiteration. "I never thought you would have seen them." "Then you were wrong," shouted her master. "I will see them. Bring them in." He was a tall, gaunt old man, and Robin stared at him for some minutes, wondering where he could have seen somebody very like him. At last he remembered. It was the old gentleman of the blue cloak. The children threw off their wraps, the housekeeper helping them, and chattering ceaselessly, from sheer nervousness. "Well, to be sure," said she, "their dresses are pretty, too. And they seem quite a better sort of children, they talk quite genteel. I might ha' knowed they weren't like common mummers, but I was so flusterated hearing the bell go so late, and, are they ready?" said the old man, who had stood like a ghost in the dim light of the flaring tallow candle, grimly watching the proceedings. "Yes, sir. Shall I take them to the kitchen, sir, for you and the other idle hussies to gape and grin at?" "No. Bring them to the library," he snapped, and then stalked off, leading the way. The housekeeper accordingly led them to the library, and then withdrew, nearly falling on her face as she left the room by stumbling over Darky, who slipped in last like a black shadow. The old man was seated in a carved oak chair by the fire. "I never said the dogs were to come in," he said. "But we can't do without them, please," said Robin, boldly. "You see there are 8 people in the Peace Egg, and there are only 5 of us, and so Darky has to be the Black Prince, and Pax has to be the Fool, and so we have to have them." 5 and 2 make 7, said the old man, with a grim smile. "What do you do for the 8th? "Oh, that's the little one at the end," said Robin, confidently. "Mama said we weren't to mention him, but I think that's because we're children, you're grown up, you know, so I'll show you the book, and you can see for yourself," he went on, drawing the Peace Egg from his pocket. "There, that's the picture of him, on the last page, black, with horns and a tail." The old man's stern face relaxed into a broad smile as he examined the grotesque woodcut, but when he turned to the first page the smile vanished in a deep frown, and his eyes shone like hot coals with anger. He had seen Robin's name. "Who sent you here?" he asked, in a hoarse voice. "Speak, and speak the truth. Did your mother send you here?" Robin thought the old man was angry with them for playing truant. He said, slowly, "No. She didn't exactly send us, but I don't think she'll mind our having come if we get back in time for supper. Mama never forbid our going mumming, you know. I don't suppose she ever thought of it," Nicholas said candidly, wagging his curly head from side to side. "She knows we're mummers," said Robin, "for she helped us. When we were abroad, you know, she used to tell us about the mummers acting at Christmas, when she was a little girl, and so we thought we'd be mummers, and so we acted to Papa and Mama, and so we thought we'd act to the maids, but they were cleaning the passages, and so we thought we'd really go mumming, and we've got several other houses to go to before supper time. We'd better begin, I think," said Robin, and without more ado he began to march round and round, raising his sword, and the performance went off quite as creditably as before. As the children acted, the old man's anger wore off. He watched them with an interest he could not repress. When Nicholas took some hard thwacks from Robert without flinching, the old man clapped his hands, and after the encounter was over, he said he would not have had the dogs excluded on any consideration. It was just at the end, when they were all marching round and round, holding on by each other's swords over the shoulder, and singing a mumming "We will go," etc., that Nicholas suddenly brought the circle to a standstill by stopping dead short, and staring up at the wall before him. "What are you stopping for?" said Robert, turning indignantly around. "Look there," cried Nicholas, pointing to a little painting which hung above the old man's head. Robin looked, and said abruptly, "It's Dora." "Which is Dora?" asked the old man in a strange, sharp tone. "Here she is," said Robin and Nicholas in one breath, as they dragged her forward. "She's the doctor," said Robin, "and you can't see her face for her things. Dor, take off your cap and pull back that hood. There. Oh, it is like her. It was the portrait of her mother as a child, but of this the nursery mummers knew nothing." The old man looked as the peaked cap and hood fell away from Dora's face and fair curls, and then he uttered a sharp cry, and buried his head upon his hands. The boys stood stupefied, but Dora ran up to him, and putting her little hands on his arms, said, in childish pitying tones, "Oh, I am so sorry. Have you got a headache? May Robin put the shovel in the fire for you? Mama has hot shovels for her headaches." And though the old man did not speak or move, she went on coaxing him, and stroking his head, on which the hair was white. At this moment Pax took one of his unexpected runs, and jumped into the old man's knee, in his own particular fashion, and then yawned at the company. The old man was startled, and lifted his face suddenly. It was wet with tears. "Why, you're crying," exclaimed the children with one breath. "It's very odd," said Robin, fretfully. "I can't think what's the matter tonight. Mama was crying too when we were acting, and Papa said we weren't to tease her with questions, and he kissed her hand, and I kissed her hand too. And Papa said we must all be very good and kind to poor dear Mama, and so I mean to be, she's so good. And I think we'd better go home, or perhaps she'll be frightened," Robin added. "She's so good, is she?" asked the old man. He had put Pax off his knee, and taken Dora onto it. "Oh, isn't she?" said Nicholas, swaying his curly head from side to side as usual. "She's always good," said Robin, emphatically, "and so's Papa. But I'm always doing something I oughtn't to," he added, slowly. "But then, you know, I don't pretend to obey Sarah. I don't care a fig for Sarah, and I won't obey any woman but Mama." "Who's Sarah?" asked the grandfather. "She's our nurse," said Robin, "and she tells, I mustn't say what she tells, but it's not the truth. She told one about you the other day," he added. "About me?" said the old man. "She said you were our grandpapa. So then I knew she was telling you know what." "How did you know it wasn't true?" the old man asked. "Why, of course," said Robin, "if you were our Mama's father, you'd know her, and be very fond of her, and come to see her. And then you'd be our grandfather, too, and you'd have us to see you, and perhaps give us Christmas boxes. I wish you were," Robin added with a sigh. "It would be very nice, would you like it?" asked the old man of Dora, and Dora, who was half asleep and very comfortable, put her little arms about his neck as she was wont to put them around the captain's, and said, "Very much." He put her down at last, very tenderly, almost unwillingly, and left the children alone. By and by he returned, dressed in the blue cloak, and took Dora up again. "I will see you home," he said. The children had not been missed. The clock had only just struck 9 when there came a knock on the door of the dining room, where the captain and his wife still sat by the Yule log. She said, "Come in," wearily, thinking it was the frumenty and the Christmas cakes. But it was her father, with her child in his arms. Section 8. The captain had many friends who knew of the sad estrangement between his wife and her father. Some of them were in church the next day, which was Christmas Day, when the captain's wife came in. They would have hid their faces, but for the startling sight that met the gaze of the congregation. The old grandfather walked into church abreast of the captain. "They've met in the porch," whispered one under the shelter of his hat. "They can't quarrel publicly in a place of worship," said another, turning pale. "She's gone into his seat," cried a girl in a shrill whisper. "And the children after her," added her sister, incautiously aloud. There was now no doubt about the matter. The old man in his blue cloak stood for a few moments politely disputing the question of precedence with his handsome son-in-law. Then the captain bowed and passed in, and the old man followed him. By the time that the service was ended everybody knew of the happy peacemaking, and was glad. One old friend after another came up with blessings and good wishes. This was a proper Christmas, indeed, they said. There was a general rejoicing. But only the grandfather and his children knew that it was hatched from the peace egg.